Hello friends, Ashton here. So today I'm going to share a live coding project with you. And this project is about a topic here in Google Sheets. It's basically a method or a solution to debounce the type in the spreadsheet for the onEdit trigger. So what I mean by that, so sometimes I think for the most of the time, when we are using the onEdit trigger in this spreadsheet, because every single type in the file is going to trigger an event if we're trying to use the onEdit trigger. So that means if I bind a function like this one, toast something here, anything I type here is going to trigger the function. Okay, so that means if I type for thing here is going to call, is going to do something 4 times. But sometimes this is what we need, but for sometimes we don't want to do that. So this is the solution. We only execute the basically we execute the function only we stop typing. So like for example, let me just get rid of this, and I'm going to type here, type here, type here, and until I stop typing. Wait a few seconds, and then we have this function executed, and we have this value here, and E8 is the final update, right? So this is basically the project, and I will going to show you how to do it step by step. So let's get started. And right now I'm in my terminal here, and I'm in this project for live coding. So if you can go to my GitHub, you can get this repository from there, and you can start from any directory on your computer. It doesn't matter. So right now I am in live coding, and the source and the project folder. So if I do a list here, it's going to list the project I've released. So the previous one is 19. So I'm going to create a folder here called live coding 020. So this is going to have a new folder here. I'm going to set it to this folder. All right, so I shouldn't have any file here. All right, so I'm trying to show you how I'm going to start a new project from my local environment. So I think so to do this, we have to make sure we have this tool created, installed on your computer. So it's called Clasp. So I have this installed if you're trying to check it. I'm going to create a new project, and we have this command here, and I can give it a title. So this is going to be the title for your project name, and the type for this file should be sheets, because we're trying to solve the problem for the onEdit in Google Sheets. So if I press enter, it's going to create this project on my Google Drive. Okay, it's going to take a while, and it's going to create the file for you, and also it's going to create a script here. So right now, if I'm trying to do a list here, I can probably I should have 2 files here in this folder. I have a .clasp.json file, and another one is this appscript.json file is for the project. Okay, so this is basically the initial setup, and I'm going to open my code editor so I can see the code here. I'm trying to format this data. So this is the initial setup for if I'm trying to create a new project from Clasp. It's going to add this code for us. So this is basically configuration. So I'm trying to check this code here. You can see this is the appscript.json file, and we don't need to do anything here for now. Okay, for the root drive, I think I'm going to delete both of them. I don't need to use them. But for the router, I can keep it here because we are using the current directory. So I think that's it. I'm going to remove this. You don't have to do that. All right. So to set up this project, first, I need to create a new file here, and I'm going to attach a new file. I'm going to call a name here called main.js. So here we are creating a new file here called main.js, but when we push the code to the cloud, the file name is going to be changed to .js. So let me show you here. I'm going to create a new function here. It seems like it's not working. Okay, I'm in a wrong file. I'm going to close this one. No, I'm not going to save it. So right now I'm in this file. I'm going to create a function first for the onEdit event, and I'm going to put an underscore after this because onEdit is like a namespace is used by Google. So if we are using onEdit, it's like the function onOpen to create the menu. So every time if you are trying to open, this function is going to be triggered or fired every time a spreadsheet is open. So this is like a reserved function name used by Google. So you have to, you need to know, this. So if you don't want to define function for onEdit, and you need to rename it something else. So I put an underscore here for some purpose. I'm going to show you later. And I just going to console log something here. This is basically the onEdit. And for testing, so I'm going to, since I add a new file on my local, right? I need to do a test here, and I can class push the code from my local environment or from my computer to the cloud, and now I have this pushed successfully. And if I'm trying to open the file, I can use clasp open to open the project file. Right now it's opening, I think. Let me check. Okay, see this folder. Let me just open it here, and I'm going to grab this file into here. All right, I'm sorry, not this one. You should be grab this one into live coding, so I can organize my files. And it should create a spreadsheet too. So I'd like to open this file too, so I can show you what's going on here. I'm going to drag this file too. I'm sorry, not here. Live coding. Should be here. I'm going to remove this one. Okay, so this is basically the new file we just created from our local environment, from our local clasp command, and I create a new file. And in this file, if I'm checking the code here, you will see here we have an onEdit function created, and we have a main file.js created. And for this underscore here, we have a special purpose here. So if I put an underscore here, you will see we cannot see this function in the drop-down list from here. This is a way to hide some function from your project. Okay, so if I remove this and I save the project, so you will see it here, and I can run this function, and then we get the console log here. All right, so this is something I'd like to share with you, just in case you need to use it. Little trick. And okay, so let's focus on the project. And this project is basically, so basically every time if I have an onEdit trigger, and let me just show you here. So every time if I'm do a spreadsheet get, let's just create a function called toast, because I'm going to use this for later. And it defines this function is going to take a message and a title. So for the title, we can put a default title for this as a default value for this title. So I'm going to return the spreadsheet. I'm going to get the active one, and I'm going to toast and then put the message in the title, and we should have a timeout here, and timeout in second, I think. I'm sorry, I missed the third one. Timeout in seconds. Let's put it 5 seconds or 4 seconds. I think by default is 5 seconds if you didn't assign anything here. So, and here I'm going to call this function toast and then pass a message here just for testing. And the title, I'm going to add it on edit, I'm sorry. So let's push these changes to the cloud so we can verify this. And I need to remove this one here to make it working. Because as I said, this onEdit is a reserved function for AppScript. So if right now if I go back to the file here, if I reload this page here, we should have the update here, right? And in the file, if I do some change, right now it's not going to work, I think. it's because I need to complete the authorization because we are using this API here. So let me try to manually trigger this function, and I'm going to complete the authorization process for the first time. Okay. So now let me show you the problem. So every time if I did some change here, you will see here is this toast is triggered every time I did a change, right? So every single time I did some change in this spreadsheet. So this is basically the normal process. Every time if we have some change in the Google Sheets and I need to trigger this function or some task I'd like to complete. But for some cases, this is going to be a kind of resource waste because sometimes we are watching the whole spreadsheet, and because sometimes users may enter the data very quickly, and we don't want to execute the task every time they did a change. Maybe we want to delay this some kind of, maybe we put some kind of delay. So if I'm keep typing and until I stop typing for a few seconds or something like that, and then we trigger the script and complete the task. So this is what I'm trying to achieve in this project. It's called Debounce for the event, for the onEdit events. Okay, so this is something we're trying to do. Let's get back to the project, and to achieve this, I'm going to create a function called Debounce, but you can call this function whatever you want. And this function is going to take 2 parameters or 2 arguments here. So the first argument is going to be a function, and the second one is going to be a delay. So here I'm going to call it milliseconds. Okay. So I can add some comments here. First parameter is going to take a function, and the second one, I'm going to copy this line. The second one is going to be a number, it's going to be ms. Basically, this is going to be the delay time in milliseconds, and this is going to be the function to be delayed or debounced, and it's going to return a function, and this function is going to be a debounced version of the past function. Okay. So this is basically this debounce function is basically take a function as a parameter, and it's going to delay the execution of this function by some milliseconds. And of course we can add a default value here like 3 seconds or something like that. You can do that for sure, but I'm going to keep it simple like this. And this function is going to return another function. So you can use arrow function here if you want, but you also can use a function like this. So I'm going to do it here like this. So we are returning, because this is output, right? This output here, this is output going to be a function. So this is going to be our output, and it's going to take fn function as a parameter, and we take ms for the milliseconds for the delay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to save a state. So the first thing I'm going to do here is going to save the states of this function, okay? Because we can call this one, right? For now, maybe I'm keep calling this function, the same function, right? So every call of this function is going to have a state. So to save it, we have some options here to save these states. So for app script, we can save it to some kind of storage, like a property service. So I'm going to create a storage here. So we can utilize the property service. And we're going to get, so you have these options. You can save this to the script property or the user property or the document property. So there could be some difference here, but for this case, I'm going to use the user's property. So maybe I'm using this script, but only I am using it. But maybe this is also used by someone else on the same file, so it could be a little bit different. So this is the storage, and I'm going to save these states. So we need a state. So these states could be anything related to the current scene, okay? So I'm going to use a time to do that. So I'm going to use date object to get the current time, and I'm going to change it to string. So this is like states we're trying to do here. So every time, because the function is called in a different time, right? So the time we're going to be different, and we're going to save it. So I'm going to storage and set property, and I'm going to take a key, and the value is going to be, we are setting the states, but I'm missing the key. So the key is going to be the fn.name, because the function have a name. So we are using this name, the function name. If this function is onEdit, so this name is going to be onEdit. So it's like a key. So we can check this key next time. All right, so this is basically the first step to save a state of the function call. Maybe this function call, right? And the second step here, we need to delay the function or the process. So here, to delay it, we can use the utility function here called sleep, and it's going to take a millisecond as a parameter here. So we can pass the millisecond from here, and then we delay the process. So this is basically the second step. And the final one, the last step here, we're going to check the states. So so we can check the storage, right? We have the storage here, and we're going to get the key, get the state from this key. So the key is going to be the function name here, right? So if this state is not equal to the states we saved to the storage, so that means another call on this function is somewhere. So if I call this one, so the state is set, and if somebody or I trigger this function again, then the states is going to be different, because we are using the time, the current time when the event is triggered. So if it's different, so that means I'm going to ignore this function. I'm going to ignore this task here. So I'm going to return the function here without execute without invoke this function here, and else. So I can use the else here. So if it's not the state is not the same, I'm going to ignore the function, and if it's the same, I'm going to invoke this function here like this. But we can remove this else and keep it short like this. Okay, so this is basically the function, but I did miss something here. So I need to pass, just in case we have some arguments here, I can pass this argument from here, from this function here, from the function we returned, and I can use this argument here. So this extension here is basically, it depends, we could pass multiple arguments in that function, so this is a way to handle this kind of argument pass. Okay, so this is basically the debounce function. So okay, so I think now we have this set up. Let me just have this closed, and we can create a function here. Let's say I like to create OnEdit debounced. So this is like a function which is a debounced version of the OnEdit. So this is going to be very easy to do. So I'm just use this function, and it's going to take a function as the first parameter. So the function, it should be this OnEdit, not like this, okay? Just the name of the function you want to debounce. And the second parameter is going to be the time. Let's say I would like to delay it or debounce it every 3 seconds. So it should be 3000 like this. And I'm going to call this function. And because OnEdit function is going to take a event object. So let me show you what I mean here. Because every time if there is OnEdit in the Google Sheet, it's going to pass a event object to the OnEdit function, and you can retrieve some data from the OnEdit. So let me show you here. This should be on the function. This should be a parameter and the Google App Script and events, and this should be a OnEdit, a document OnEdit, and this should be an event. Okay, so now if I'm trying to use this event here, so we can get some data here like the old value. So if I edit a cell, we should have the old value and we have a new value, right? Something like that. So let me just get the old value. So maybe I'd like to get a data here. I'd like to get some old data, right? So old, go to old value, and new. There is no new value, it's just a value. Okay, value for new value. And maybe we can get the range name. So range. I'm going to get the A1 notation for the range. And we can do something like, we could have a case there is no old value, so I can do a check here, no old value, and maybe no new value, just in case. It could be empty or something like that. Okay, so now we have this data, and we can create a message here to basically to show a text version of this data object. Okay, I'm going to string find this data object. I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to pass this message here, and for the title, I'm going to keep it OnEdit. So this is the basically this OnEdit function here, and I'm going to create another function. So this function is basically the OnEdit debounced version to do something for here, but the function here we're going to use is called OnEdit. So this is the trigger function when we do some change in the Google Sheets. Okay, so here I'd like to call the onEdit debounced version here, but I'd like to pass the object here, the event here, and I need to pass this here so we can receive all of this event object. So this onEdit is basically the trigger function, and this function is going to fire or going to trigger this onEdit debounced version. So it's going to call this version. So this is going to be the change. So let me show you what I mean here. If I push the code, okay, I hope I didn't do anything wrong here. So let me just close my camera. And so this time, if I'm doing something like A, B, so I'm going to wait a few seconds, I hope. Right now, you will see here, I can have this toast only for B, right? And I did some change here for A, but there is no toast for this A. But but the event did triggered. So we trigger something here, we trigger something here, we trigger something here, and only if I stop, and then we got the event triggered, all right? And we got the value G10 here is the final one is triggered. So these two, they're basically ignored. So to prove this, let me update the code a little bit to you in the debounce function here. So here, if this is ignored, I'd like to console log ignored. And in this case, I'm going to log something different. I think this is invoked. Okay, so this is basically to show you if this function is really so invoked or ignored. And let me just push the code. And go back. And this time, I'd like to show you the log here. Oops. So in the log, so I did something like ignored, 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 and the final. So you will see here we have some trigger, onEdit function is triggered, and the final change here is this new final, and the B11 is basically the final trigger. And you will see here, if I'm checking this log here, I should say ignored, ignored. So this is basically not a real debounce. It's basically the onEdit trigger is still triggered, but the task in this onEdit trigger is ignored. We won't execute anything. We just trigger this, but it's just check the status, and it's going to ignore things like this. So I think only the last one is invoked. So this is the last one, which is invoked, and show a toast here in this spreadsheet. So that's basically the process, right? So how we're going to use it, and you can use it in any function you need to use. Okay. So I think that's basically the basic setup. So this is the onEdit trigger like this, but I'd like to show you one more thing. So in AppScript for this onEdit trigger, we have two kind of status, two types of onEdit trigger. Okay, so even they're calling the same. So let me show you what I mean here. So let me check the log. So the onEdit trigger right now we are using is called simple trigger. we have another trigger called installed trigger. Okay, so let me show you what I mean, installed trigger. So if I create a function here, I'm going to create a function here to install triggers or install OnEdit triggers. So this function here, I'm going to create a function to install the OnEdit trigger. And before we install the trigger, so the trigger name, I think I'm going to use this one, the name of the trigger function. So I'm going to use this trigger function name. I'm going to use this OnEdit debounced. This is going to be the function name going to be triggered, because this OnEdit here at this line is the install. This is simple type. So this version here, simple trigger. So it's always OnEdit. But for the install trigger, so what I mean is installable trigger is basically a type of trigger you can add here. So there could be some difference. Okay, so installed. So I can use this OnEdit, and I'm going to create a function. So this is a function you can use. You can still use this function for OnEdit, but it's going to, like a duplication or something like that. You have two triggers on this trigger. Okay, and then if I select this function, I'm going to create a function to do that for you. So this is a name we're using, and to create a new trigger, so you can use the script app API and the function name. So trigger function name passed here, and we're going to form a spreadsheet. For the spreadsheet, and you need to pass either a spreadsheet object or a spreadsheet ID here. So I'm going to use spreadsheet.getActive. I'm going to OnEdit is going to be the event, and I'm going to create it. So this way it's going to create this trigger for you. Okay, and I think I'm going to create another function to uninstall OnEdit triggers. Going to duplicate this line because we're checking this trigger name in the triggers. I'm going to get the project triggers. I'm going to loop through the triggers here. I'm going to take the trigger. So here I'm going to check the trigger name. Okay, so first if the trigger I think it's called get handler function is the name of the function for this trigger. So if it's not equal to the trigger function name, we're going to return, basically ignore this trigger. We won't delete this one because it could be created for some other function. And I'm going to check the type. So we get event type. So if the event type is not equal to script app event type is not equal to OnEdit, so this could be this function, the same function, but it's on a different event type, maybe something else, right? So I won't delete this trigger too, and else I'm going to delete the trigger script app. We have a method here to delete the trigger, and I'm going to pass the trigger to delete it. So this is a function to uninstall the OnEdit trigger, and this function here is to install the OnEdit trigger. But I'd like to call the uninstall here before we create a new one, just in case, because we don't want to create this trigger twice or more times like that. So if I'm trying to create this trigger, I'm going to, to check or uninstall the others first, and then we create a new one, things like this. And maybe I'd like to create the last function here to add this to the menu so you can use it. So the last function I'm going to create is called onOpen, and so this onOpen is also have an event here, event object here, but we will not use it in this project, so I'm just leave it here. And to create a menu, so first we need to get the UI for the spreadsheet. So we get the UI, and we're going to create a menu here. We're going to create the menu, and the caption, the name of the menu, let's call it script. So we can add the menu here, add item to, not add item, yes, add item. So the first one, install trigger or install OnEdit trigger, and the function name here is called install OnEdit trigger. And I'm going to add another one here, uninstall, right? Uninstall the trigger. And finally, I'm going to add this to UI so we can see it in the spreadsheet. So let's push the code. So this is basically to create a menu, a custom menu in the spreadsheet. So I think I need to reload this page to see the menu. Okay, so now we have install and uninstall. So if I try to run this function, and we'll see this again because we have a new API, which is basically the trigger API. So the new API is basically allow this application to run when we are not present. So basically, this is about the trigger, and we're going to allow this, and we're going to install the trigger. So we have the trigger installed. To prove this to you, we can open the project here, and if I go to the triggers tab here, right? So this is the trigger we created for this onEdit function on this onEdit debounced. So to prove this is now working, I need to disable this function here, because this is also a debounced function, but actually I'd like to keep it here to show you the difference. So I say this is a test, and I think wait 3 or 4 seconds. Now we have this, right? But if I'm checking the log, so you will see here we have this onEdit ignored, and then this one is invoked because we have two triggers. They are different type. So the first one is this onEdit. This is a simple trigger which is bind to this onEdit function, and the second one is the one we are just installed. This is a installable trigger. So this is a different trigger, different type of trigger, but they're on the basically the same function. Okay, so that's why this one is ignored and this one is invoked. All right, so that means we can have this disabled, have this function removed, and we do have some limitation on this simple trigger onEdit. I think the runtime for this is just 30 seconds, and while this one we have 6 minutes, I think, for this version, and we have a lot of limitation on this simple trigger. So for the most of the time, we should choose this version here. But I'd like to show you both of them in this project so you can use it. So I think that's almost it for this project. But before I go, I'd like to show you my way to improve this a little bit for this install triggers thing here, because right now this is kind of confusing because you don't know if the trigger is already installed or not installed or so you cannot see the status in this menu. So it should be a little bit better way. If I have the trigger installed, I should show uninstall here only, and if this trigger is not installed, I should have this install trigger menu here. So let me show you my solution to this. It's just my solution. It's not perfect, but it's going to handle the problem. All right. So here, before we add the item to the menu, we're going to check something called trigger installed. So I'm going to save this to the script properties. So because so here you have two options. So if you just want to have this trigger installed only once for the whole project, you don't want to. So it's better to use a script property, because the script property is going to be shared by multiple users. And if you are checking this for user property, so that means different user can install the triggers, but they can only install them for once. So let me just use the script property here, and I'm going to get the property. So the key here, I'm going to call it trigger. Actually, I'm going to create a global here called key trigger installed, and I'm going to put this global here, trigger because we are going to use it somewhere else, trigger installed, and here. So if the trigger is installed and else, so if this trigger is installed, trigger, I have some typo here, trigger installed, weird. I think this one here. Okay, if the trigger is installed, I'm going to add this item here. So this menu item, uninstall the trigger, else I'm going to put this install OnEdit trigger to the menu. So this is the first update we need to do, okay? So we need to check if this is installed or not. And we need to do an update on the uninstall function here. So when we uninstall the trigger, we need to remove, right, this property. So I'm going to get the script property and going to delete the property called the key trigger uninstall. And I'm going to call this on open function to refresh the menu. And let me copy these two lines of code. And the only change for this install, instead of delete the property, I'm going to set the property. So we can see in the value here, you can put any value here. Let's just add a true here. So this could be, sometimes we can use the, so this value, you can use something different, maybe the email of the person who is installed this trigger. So like if I'm trying to get an email, I'm going to use session, get the active user, and I'm going to get the email, something like this. All right, so in this case, I'm saving this the user's information for this trigger, who installed this trigger, and you even can check this email address if you want. Okay, so I'd like to keep it simple, so let's just put it true here. And I think that's going to do the things here. Let's just push the code. All right, so to check these ones, right now I need to reload because we updated the on open function. Now we have this on install OnEdit trigger in one single here, right? So if I install the trigger and it's completed, and now I have this uninstall OnEdit trigger. And if I uninstall OnEdit trigger, I should have different menu to install it. So it's like a toggle or a switch. So either we install or uninstall from the script. So I think that's it for this project, and I'll see you in the next one.